Hello and welcome to my rebuttal debate. Today I'm debating against the opinion that Ukraine should not be allowed to join NATO. My stance is that they should. There's a couple reasons for that, but before I address some of those, first I do want to discuss a counterpoint to provide myself an opportunity to provide a rebuttal. First, one of the most notable points in opposition to Ukraine's joining of NATO is fear of Russian retaliation. Many people are acting in such a way towards the thought of Ukraine joining this organization out of fear. And really, no other reasons, which I don't think is a fair or realistic way to look at the situation as a whole. Now, I don't disagree with the thought that allowing Ukraine a spot in NATO would upset Russia. It definitely would, without a doubt. But at the same time, this is Russia. This isn't the Soviet Union. They may be our rival, but truthfully, we don't have any reason to fear them. The United States alone has over double the population, and per this chart, you can see that it has about 10 times the military spending. And that's just the United States in an organization with dozens of other global powers, such as countries like the United Kingdom, France, Germany. While admitting Ukraine to NATO may upset Russia, they cannot and they will not act on it. Admitting Ukraine into NATO, all that would do is that just be a net positive. For one, it would provide Ukraine with security under Article 5 of NATO, where it's essentially said an attack on one is an attack on all. Russia may hate our guts for eternity for the move, but really there's nothing that they can do without significant retaliation back on them. And the last thing Russia wants to do is trigger all of NATO to come to the defense of one member nation. Admitting Ukraine into NATO in the past would have protected them from the current conflict. And while I don't think we should admit them while they're in the midst of a war, I do believe we should leave the door open for the Ukrainians for after the war resolves itself. Another point made was that Ukraine being a part of NATO may negatively affect how coherent NATO is in working with one another, as we have different historical perspectives on rival nations such as Russia. While this is true, especially for Ukraine, given that they are both former Soviet nations, they have drifted further and further away in the last few decades, especially with the threat of Russia against Ukraine. Ukraine has slowly become a little bit more westernized. While not Western in the same sense as we are, or much of Western Europe, a lot of our values and our alliances are one and the same, or at least getting to that point. So instead of finding this as a weakness, these differences in our opinions or our history, I actually think it would benefit NATO greatly if we were to have these differing perspectives. It would allow us to better plan for worst case scenarios. Ukraine would have a very different and significantly more advanced knowledge of Russia, their inner workings due to their proximity and former Soviet Union status, similar cultures, similar history, similar language, etc. Ultimately, Ukraine would be like the secret weapon for NATO to prevent Russia from running free, like a trump card. Ultimately, I don't disagree that this would upset Russia. But I also don't see why we're particularly sweating it either. Allowing Ukraine to join NATO once peace talks are resolved would serve as a net positive for all involved parties. All prior NATO countries, us, Canada, UK, so on and so forth. Ukraine, now Russia may oppose it, but there's nothing that they can really do to prevent that from occurring. They can be upset all they want, but it'll only benefit us and Ukraine in that. Thanks for listening to my rebuttal here, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.